We're here in Mardo in Auburn with the legendary Yassmin Abdel-Magied from Queensland, who was just off Q&A last night and has graced us with her lovely presence today. So Yassmin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and that was an epic introduction. You mean you guys have graced me with your awesome conversation, so thank you.
Extra ice cream scoop.
That's pretty much all I was going for.
There you go, wife factor makes your dreams come true, or at least that's what we try to do.
All your culinary dreams at least.
So we'll just jump right into it. Your resume speaks for itself, but at the end of the day, no one is really just a walking resume. So we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt and strip you away of all of that, academic high achieving self. Why don't you tell us in a nutshell how you would describe Yassmin Abdel-Magied?
Yassmin Abdel-Magied in a nutshell. I think I'd probably say I'm Sudanese born, Egyptian sort of mixed, bit of Turkish and Moroccan up in there, so pretty much a mongrel. Moved to Brisbane when I was about a year and a half with my parents, and I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, motorsport nut, dabbled in a bit of boxing here and there, and I'm generally someone that I think is really passionate about the empowerment of, I guess, young people, women, and those who face obstacles in achieving things. I'm a big sort of advocate for equity across the board and for, I suppose, helping people see that they have the capacity to change the community around them and to change the space around them and to find what they want to be their identity, I think. And I'm a bit of an adventure junkie. I work on oil and gas rigs because I thought it would be a bit of a laugh.
And is it a bit of a laugh?
Oh, mate, it's hilarious.
You were talking to us before we, started the recording about a couple of incidents that you had, and maybe it would tie in a little bit better to some of the questions we have down the track. But the fact that you are a woman, a Muslim hijabi woman on an oil rig, how did that work out for you?
Look, it happened a little bit by accident. I actually wanted to work in F1 and kind of almost got there. I was offered work experience in with Mercedes F1, and I was going to travel to the UK and study there. But I actually decided that after a long process of reflection, that although as much as I loved Formula One, working in it and dedicating my entire life to a sport wasn't necessarily where I thought I could have the greatest impact on other people around me. And so I thought, what else could be pretty cool? And essentially I'd walked by one of those career stands that said, would you like a job on an oil rig? And I was like, you know what, why not? And I'm pretty sure my dad didn't talk to me for like 9 months when I told him. Yeah, he was a little bit not happy.
Even though your parents also coming from an engineering background?
Yeah, so my dad's an electrical engineer and is always very supportive, but in his mind it would probably have been more appropriate for me to take the nice safe job in Brisbane in the office. But me being the person I am, wanted to sort of try something different, and I ended up working on oil and gas rigs around the country. Got to travel to different places, including Houston, Texas, which was awesome. They offered me Alaska, but my mum was like, Yasmina, there is no way you are going to Alaska. I don't care how awesome you think you are not going to Alaska.
It's good to know that someone as awesome as you still can stress my mum problems.
Mate. I live on rigs, but when I go home, there is still a curfew and there is still dishes to be washed, and
you're regular.
Just the classic. Yasmina, why are the dishes still there, Mom? But yeah.
So you may have been on Q&A, but you still need to do your mum tells you.
Exactly. No matter how awesome we think we are, we're still our parents' kids,
And we wouldn't want it any other way.
Exactly.
That's family.
Yeah, and I think it definitely grounds you and keeps you. I think a big part of it is to stay humble and to stay true, and I'm really, really thankful for my parents because I think they've given me a lot in terms of education but also opportunity.
So tell us about Youth Without Borders, because when we were doing our little stalking activities, we uncovered that you started this organisation when you were only 16. So what do you aim to achieve through it?
So the official mission for Youth Without Borders is that we work with young people to work together to implement positive change in their communities, and it's about empowering young people to do that. We're non-causal, so it's not about one particular cause. What we're about is getting young people who have ideas to come to us, and we help them make it happen. or we sort of within the organisation look at what our members want to do in any way to sort of change their community and try to enable that. A lot of the stuff that we do at the moment is focused around education and focused around providing opportunities for people who face obstacles in a variety of ways. Our biggest project at the moment is the Spark Engineering Camp. It's been running for 3 years in Queensland, and we sponsor over 60 students from around the state who are low socioeconomic, refugee or asylum seeker, Indigenous, or face some sort of disadvantage to university. Kids who would never have thought about going to university. And we sponsor them for a week to come to Brisbane and spend a week at the uni. We show them what engineering is about. We show them that it's something that they could possibly do, and then we leave it up to them. And we do a lot of personal development type stuff. And the idea of that is essentially to say to someone, just because of the place where you're from, or no one else in your family may have gone to university, but that doesn't mean those opportunities aren't there for you.
And how do you manage to sponsor them? I mean, like in terms of financial backing, how does that work?
We've been really fortunate, alhamdulillah, to get a lot of sponsorship from engineering companies. So we're really proud. Last year we raised about $70,000 in sponsorship to run this program. And next year, inshallah, this year, 2014, will be our first year. We'll run it in Melbourne as well. That's something that's really exciting. So that's been our biggest project. But there have been other things along the way. We've sort of run your classic fundraisers. We set up right at the beginning of IWD. We helped set up mobile libraries in Indonesia. And the trick there was we didn't necessarily have to go to Indonesia to set it all up. We were, I guess, the catalyst. So we talked to a whole bunch of different organisations there, brought them together, created a proposal, and then helped them get pro bono sponsorship to be able to make it happen. And now we're working with a couple of schools in Sudan to also fundraise to provide textbooks and that sort of thing. But really it's about young people saying, well, I kind of want to do something. They might not necessarily know what they want to do, but we want to link them up to opportunities. We want to show them that they may not think that they have the capacity to change people or to change their communities or to have an impact, but they do. It's what I like to impress upon people. Every single one of us has the capacity to change the world around us. Even by simply existing, we are changing the world around us, and it's our choice to change it in which way we want to. I got the inspiration for this from a very important book I read, which was a novel about Sabrina the Teenage Witch. and she, this was when I was like 13, one of her spells went wrong, and she erased herself completely. And she saw what life was like without her existence. You know, her aunties were fighting and her best friend was dating some guy who was a drug addict and all of this sort of drama simply because she wasn't there and her influence wasn't there. And I thought, if I disappeared from existence, what would my impact be?
What have you left behind?
What have I left behind,
Yeah.
you know? And what's a sadaqah jariyah? It's already something that's going to happen. So why not make it as positive and as wide-reaching as possible?
But where do you find the time to do all of this? I mean, you live on an oil rig most of the time. The rest of the time you're doing dishes at home. So when do you find time to work on Youth Without Borders?
Look, it isn't easy to manage time, and I think the trick is when you have something you value, you will find time for it. So it's about, I guess, managing priorities. It's about maybe watching one less episode of whatever season of whatever series. I know. There's a couple of techniques I use as well. Like, I think it's called a Pomodoro technique, where you time yourself for half an hour and you're going to say, I'm going to do no Facebook and no phone for half an hour and just work solid. And it's actually surprisingly hard to do. And when you go solid, you can do a lot in that little amount of time.
Yeah.
But I guess it's about, in the same way that you find time for the people that you want to hang out with, you find time for the stuff that you want to do. And also appreciating that you can't always do everything, and that sometimes you've got to take time out for yourself and re-energize, and that's when you can create awesome stuff afterwards as well.
Well, this is kind of a more abstract question, but you know, a lot of people think that when you're young, you're idealistic and you want to change the world and stuff, but then by the time you're like 30, you'll be settled down with like a mortgage and kids, and you know, so helping people is kind of just something you do when you're young, and when you're older, it just stops. So how do we kind of get out of that mentality of like volunteering is just something you do when you have a bit of spare time when you're young and still idealistic? And I guess the second part is, how do we not get burnt out? You know, when you're young and you're dealing with all these things, and then you face community politics, different organisational politics, how do you stop yourself from getting burnt out?
And maintain some kind of longevity, I suppose, to what you're doing.
It's a really good question. I'll answer the second part first. And I've been asked it before and sort of thought about it before as well. Like, all of this effort seems really hard and I can't see the change. But there's two things. One, if you don't put any effort in ever, then there will never be any change. For change to occur, there has to be people pushing for it. That's number one. And number two, change happens at a different rate to our lives. You got to think of it as like two wristwatches. One travels at like normal time, and second is maybe generational time or whatever it may be. And that just goes at a much slower rate. So you might not see the change in your lifetime, but if you look at it in a sort of 10, 20, 30 year like scale, there is a lot of change. The status of women has changed a lot in the last 50 years. The status of different, in Brisbane, for example, where I'm from, the size of the Muslim community has changed significantly in the last 10 years only, and that therefore the dynamics has changed heaps. And you wouldn't be able to pick it if you look at it in really small, discrete amounts. But it's about looking at that and not being disillusioned because you can't always see the change straight away. How do we not get burnt out, or how do we sort of continue that idealism? I suppose I like to think of myself as a realistic optimist, right? So
I like that.
Yeah, there's a difference between being naive and being optimistic, or being overly idealistic. We all have to understand that the world is the way it is and things may be difficult. I asked my mum once, I'm like, Mama, do you think really people can really change? Can communities really change? And she said, we have to. Because if we believed that they couldn't, then we wouldn't be able to believe in people converting to Islam. There was huge change when Islam was introduced, for example. If we didn't believe that real change could happen, then how did that happen? And so we have to have an innate belief that, yes, things can change. And although things may feel like they're not moving, ultimately change is the only thing that's inevitable. It's about what direction we push that change. Yes, life gets in the way sometimes, but it's also a mindset. It's also, I'm not just volunteering because I have spare time. I'm volunteering because, the way I think about it, I've been so blessed, alhamdulillah, to be brought to Australia and be given these opportunities. It's almost my duty, and so it's a mindset that you have to have.
We were discussing earlier whether we, as a mindset, should be thinking about things like utilising that particular background. You are from Sudan, you are a Muslim, you are of Muslim background. Should we be working on playing up those aspects of our personalities in order to be able to get to a stage where you can have more opportunity to give back, or I guess, reach a level where you have that luxury? Or in a sense, are we orientalising our own selves, if that's a good way to put it?
That's a really, really interesting question, and it's funny that you asked that because it's not something that I've really thought of before. And I think it comes down to what your intentions are. My mum always says to me, be genuine in what you're doing, be genuine in asking yourself why you're doing a certain thing. So in a lot of our cases, especially if you're a hijabi woman, you can't help the fact that you're visibly Muslim, and you can't help the fact that people may or may not, want to put you in a certain position because of that. The way I see it, and because I've been that person who's a hijabi, who's a mechanical engineer, and they're like, oh my God, you're so unique. And I'm like, lol. So the way I've dealt with it is I've said, okay, you've given me this amazing opportunity. I'm now going to use it to give you the perspective that you may not have heard before. You've put me at this table. I'm going to start throwing rocks so that you start seeing that, that there are other perspectives out there. Rather than throwing the rocks from when you're not on the table or when you're outside the room, you get to the table and then you start making the changes that you can by being at that table. The other important thing is for us to really focus on supporting each other as a community. For example, it's my responsibility as someone who is talking about loads of different issues to then use the opportunity to bring other Muslim women into the conversation or bring other perspectives and try to remember that it's not just about you, but it's about the issues that you're discussing. And often, I'll try to, once I've had the conversation about why I wear the hijab and how difficult it is, to grow up Australian Muslim and all that sort of drama, then start talking about other issues that I'm passionate about, manufacturing, engineering type stuff. So I guess using the platform that I've been given to broaden the scope of how people see Muslims. We can't expect people that are not of our religion and background to do all the work for us. In a way, that's almost victimizing ourselves and saying, well, we need them to give us more than a token platform. They might not necessarily know how to do that. In their mind, they might think, well, we've got one Muslim, they're all pretty much the same, right? Like, how would they know any different? Because we haven't shown them any different.
Do you think the onus should be on us as, I guess, the minority to be constantly explaining ourselves in a sense because they don't know how to deal with it? Or should the onus be on the majority to do their bit of research and put their hand forward a little bit, take that extra stretch to reach out to us and find out a little bit more? Going off the example that you were just giving of explaining being Muslim and why you wear the hijab and so on, I would personally love to see the conversation move beyond the topic of why I'm wearing a hijab and just talk to me as the Muslim Australian scarved person of very various educational backgrounds about whatever other topic there is out there. Why can't we move past that conversation?
I can definitely understand your frustration, you know, and whenever there's some sort of terrorist attack in some part of the world, having to explain it, I'm like, mate, I don't know. You probably should ask them, you know. But at the same time, has every Muslim done research on Jewish society? Has every Muslim known the proper history of the Aboriginal and the Australian conflicts and all that sort of stuff? Yes, we can hope that the community that's in the majority would do the research, but clearly haven't. And so we can sit and be upset about it, or we can do something about it, and we can start being out there. We can start talking about things. Yes, it is tiring, but at the end of the day, if we don't talk about it, who's going to do it for us? Why should they do it for us? I mean, I work in places where some of the guys have never talked to a Muslim person, and they barely realize that I'm Muslim because they've just never been exposed to it. And for me to expect them to have gone out of their way, I mean, if they've had absolutely no exposure to it, if I asked a random Muslim person on the street, have you studied the Amish? They'd probably be like, well, no, why would I care? And it's the same thing, you know, if you ask a guy that grew up in Wallumbilla, well, have you done research on Muslims? He'd be like, why should I care? I mean, it's very important to us because it's our world, but it's not their world. I think the onus is partly on us as well. Not all of us have to be public advocates, but try to relate to the other people and speak in the language. At the end of the day, we're all sharing the same land, the same opportunities. We have to find the middle ground. I mean, maybe I think this way because I did grow up in a suburb where there weren't that many other Muslim kids. I just saw myself as Aussie, and people would ask me a few questions about my religion and wonder why I go off and do weird things on a mat, but that was the extent of it. The cool thing about that was that they knew me as a person first, and then as all the other labels second. But not everyone has enough exposure for that. So I do think that, yes, it's frustrating to be constantly explaining, but until we become a part of the community beyond simply the one-dimensional label, and we do have that capacity, we just haven't gotten there yet. And look, it's not something that's easy. It's not an Australian problem. Around the world, Muslims are struggling with identity and with trying to reconcile living in the West and being Muslim and being first generation of a particular culture and not knowing if they should be individualistic or communal, or are they allowed to be a hipster, or can I take, photos, or what? I don't think we as young Muslims growing up in Australia have a good idea of what an Australian Muslim identity is yet. And it's going to be hard for us to create that, but we have a super unique opportunity to create that. You go anywhere else, like anywhere where there's an established Muslim community, there's an established identity. You know what you need to do to fit in. Here, it's pretty much a blank slate, so everyone's bringing in what they know, but we have a unique opportunity to create our own identity. So yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, we're going to have to spend a lot of time explaining, but rather than seeing it as a burden, we should see it as a blessing and an opportunity, because we have a slate where we can build whatever we want, and hopefully build something that's positive and build something that's based on what Islam is about, the spirit, the beautiful spirit that is Islam, that's timeless and applicable to every culture ever. I mean, that's the beauty of Islam. That it's amazing when you look at so many cultural ills, how Islam already has answers to that. I mean, that's the stuff we should be sharing. That's the stuff we should be talking about. We're not even saying this is the Islamic response, but simply by talking about this is a solution to this particular problem, and it coming from Islamic ruling. Yeah, people might get scared if they hear it's from Islam, but if you put it in a format that is kind of subtle, they'll be like, oh, that's so right. And you're like, actually, you know where that source comes from, right? Yes, it might not be in your face. And when I work on the rigs, right, I can't be in your face all the time, because the moment you're too much in your face, people will shut off. So you have to find a way to relate to people, to sort of speak the language they'll understand. And then that's how you sort of move forward.
But I mean, that was one of the greatest things about the Prophet ﷺ. Like, he was also able to adapt his way of sending the message to all the different communities, the Arabs, the Persians, the other empires. They were neighbouring to that.
The Ethiopians.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's definitely a lot to mull about and think about there.
Yeah.
Well,
we just touched on every solution to all the world's problems, and all solved. All done.
Yeah,
I think we're done.
Some ice cream.
Yeah. Is there anything else we need to fix with the world right now? I think that's enough for one shift. We'll just save the rest for the next time you're in town. Yassmin, thank you very much for joining the Y Factor today, and we wish you all the best, inshallah.
Thank you so much. I'm really, really excited, and good luck to everyone, inshallah.